everyone, and welcome to Democrats Abroad and to our webinar today. We will be getting started in just a little, like in 1 minute or two. We're letting everyone join the call right now. Thanks so much.
And hi all, I know that everyone on the call is interested in finding out more about Secretary Castro's campaign and Democrats Abroad's global presidential primary. If you want to ensure that Secretary Castro appears on our primary ballot, go to www.democratsabroad.org/Castro to add your name to his petition. We also encourage you to sign the petition for every candidate that you want to see on the ballot for the Democrats Abroad global presidential primary in March. Get started by signing the petition for Secretary Castro at www.democratsabroad.org/Castro.
Fantastic. We're live now on Facebook too, and I just want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. My name is Julia Bryan, and I'm the chair of Democrats Abroad. I'm joined by Amanda Mohar, our comms director, and Lizette Wright, our treasurer, and of course, Secretary Julián Castro. As many of you know, Democrats Abroad will run a global presidential primary next year. Democrats outside the US will have the chance to vote at over 100 voting centers worldwide and through remote voting too. Wherever you are, you'll be able to join in and cast your vote for the Democratic presidential candidate of your choice. To make sure voters abroad have the chance to get to know the Democratic presidential candidates, we've reached out to each campaign team, asking them to join Democrats Abroad in a global town hall so that you can hear from them directly. This also gives the candidates the chance to learn more about the issues that matter most to you and to the millions of Americans living outside the US. Unfortunately, the Secretary won't have time to take questions from the floor, but we'll be sure to share all of the questions and responses that you post with Secretary Castro's campaign team. Today, we're delighted to speak with Julián Castro. He's in San Antonio, and we're really happy he could join us. Julián Castro served as the U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Barack Obama from 2014 to 2017. Prior to that service, he was mayor of his native city in San Antonio, Texas. Public service runs in his family. His mother, Rosie, taught Julián and his twin brother, Joaquin, that if you want to make a change in your community, you don't wait. You work to make your future happen. I know we all relate to that. And so they did. With their mother's support, Julián and Joaquin went to college and law school. And in just 2 generations after their grandmother arrived in the United States with nothing, Joaquin became a member of Congress, and Secretary Castro had the honor of serving in President Obama's cabinet as head of HUD, where he worked to promote fair housing rights for minority groups across the United States. The Secretary is now running for president, and we're interested in learning more about him today. Secretary Castro, ready to take it away?
Yes, thank you very much, Julia, to Lizette and Amanda that also I know helped organize this, and to all of the Democrats abroad out there, buenos dias, buenas tardes, buenas noches, depending on where you're at. I understand that we have several hundred folks that are tuned in to this video town hall. Wherever you're at, let me just start off by saying, my best wishes for much success and happiness and carrying the American spirit to every part of the globe. Thank you also for this opportunity to visit with you. Mostly what I want to do is take questions today, but let me just tell you very briefly why I'm running for president and what I'd like to do for our country if I'm elected. I'm running for president because I feel tremendously fortunate with the opportunities that I've had to grow up in a single parent household, to go to our public schools, to get to go to college and law school, and to become the first in my family to be a professional as an attorney, and then get to serve my community as mayor of San Antonio, and then our country as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama. And I want to make sure that that kind of opportunity is there for every single person in our country, no matter who they are, what their background is, what their circumstances in life. And we're at a very critical moment in this country. My vision for the future of the country is that the United States gets smarter, healthier, fairer, and more prosperous for everyone. And I look forward to a conversation about how we can do that.
Fantastic. So thank you so much. That's wonderful to hear. And we're going to start today with one question first from Lizette. Would you like to go for it? And Lizette, let me just make sure you're off mute. 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. You know how it is. There, go for it.
Okay, as I mentioned, thank you, Secretario Julián Castro, for joining us today. This question comes from our Hispanic caucus and the Progressive Caucus. The climate crisis is a significant contributing factor to many conflicts and refugee situations around the globe, putting Americans abroad and all global citizens at risk due to political insecurity. How will you ensure the U.S. will reduce greenhouse gas emissions below the Paris Accord targets and lead the global effort to avoid catastrophic climate breakdown and global insecurity it would cause?
Thank you very much, Lizette, for the question. I see this as the call of our generation. Climate change represents an existential threat to our country's future and to the world's future. And we know from the best climate scientists out there that we only have now about a dozen years to get this right, to act aggressively to combat the climate crisis, or the consequences are going to be tragic. So here's what I would do. Number one, my first executive action on January 20th, 2021 would be to recommit to the Paris Climate Accord so that we get back on track in this country on leading in sustainability. And we send a signal to countries around the world that the United States is going to lead again and to help efforts through our leadership. Secondly, I've set out a climate action plan that recognizes two things. Number one, that this is a crisis, and it sets a goal of getting to net zero carbon emissions by 2045 in the United States, with interim goals of a clean energy standard and a clean transportation standard, as well as a carbon pollution fee. And then secondly, it also recognizes that this is a tremendous opportunity, not only a crisis, but an opportunity. Just really quickly, about 2 months ago, I was in Newton, Iowa, and I visited this company called TPI. TPI manufactures wind turbines, and Newton is a small town where they used to have a Maytag washing machine manufacturing facility. I'm told that at one time it employed close to 3,000 people, and then it closed down. And as y'all know, that's a common story in a lot of places, a lot of states where manufacturers have closed down. But then TPI opened up, and it's employed several hundred people in good paying jobs. You can write that story in Texas, in Nevada, in California, all over the United States, and really all over the world. I want to unleash millions of new jobs in a clean energy economy, in solar energy, wind energy, other renewable energies. And so my climate action plan pursues both of those goals.
Thank you. And what would you do in early 2021, independently of the cooperation of Congress or other countries, to respond to this crisis? Is there something immediately that we could get started with?
Absolutely. I think by executive order, recommitting to the Paris Climate Accord, and then going back to both our allies and our competitors, adversaries around the world, and trying to up those commitments. See if we can become more aggressive in combating the climate crisis. That's through executive action. There are other executive actions that we can take as well. For instance, some of you may have heard that recently the Trump administration is going after the state of California because of their leadership on vehicle emission standards. I want to re-empower states like California to be leaders so that they help move the industry. And my first goal would be to get a catalog of all of the executive actions that this administration has taken that have set us back when it comes to protecting our planet, and to bring them back to the levels of the Obama administration and then take it to the next level. In addition to that, immediately in early 2021, we can get the coal lobbyists and other lobbyists out of the leadership of the EPA and actually appoint people who want to protect our environment and enforce our clean water laws, our clean air laws, and lead on sustainability. And then we're going to have to work with Congress. And I believe that we should pursue a Green New Deal that both tries to get us to net zero by 2045 and then also invests tremendously in green infrastructure and the creation of jobs throughout the United States in the renewable energy industry.
Thanks, that's fantastic. Amanda, do you want to take the next question?
Sure, thanks, Julia. This is a question that has concerned many of our members, and that's on the subject of immigration. Executive orders such as the one exploiting the term public charge demonstrate that our current immigration system was founded in a shameful era of discrimination and bigotry, and that family members of Americans abroad are allowed to enter to the U.S. through a patchwork of fragile band-aids and weakly defended interpretations. Would you restore the principle of family reunification? How would your plan for immigration improve the situation for spouses, partners, and relatives of Americans living abroad, like us, who wish to return with our families?
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda, for the question. I know this is an issue that concerns a lot of people who are abroad right now or who have family members abroad as well. Yeah, so I have a completely different vision on immigration from this president. I believe that we can have an immigration system that treats people with common sense and with compassion instead of with cruelty, and that helps to reunite families. So I put out an immigration plan in early April that was the first one in the field that is bold, that says that we actually need immigrants in our country. And one of the things that we spell out is a continued commitment to family reunification. And we identified 4.4 million people who are either abroad now or are temporarily in the United States, who I believe should be put on a pathway to citizenship. And these are a lot of the folks that you're talking about, family members of people who are citizens. I also believe that our immigration system not only needs to address people who are seeking asylum. We should stop playing games with people who are seeking asylum at the border and stop metering and this Remain in Mexico policy. But also, we need to fix the broken legal immigration system, because people shouldn't have to wait 10 or 15 or 20 years if they apply for citizenship to actually become a citizen. And so we've laid out in my plan how we would do that. Then when it comes to providing a pathway to people who are living in the United States, who are undocumented, we've set out that anyone who is undocumented, as long as they haven't committed a serious crime, should be able to get on a pathway to citizenship, and that we should do smart things like partner with Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, and these Northern Triangle countries, in essentially a 21st century Marshall Plan, so that people can find safety and opportunity at home instead of having to make the dangerous journey to the southern border of the United States. Those are some of the ways that I think we can both reunite families, we can give peace of mind to people who are already here, we can treat people who are trying to seek asylum with compassion, and ultimately be more effective and humane when it comes to immigration.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting to hear. And as Amanda said, it's so top on the mind for so many of us. Here's another question that really resonates for Americans around the world, and it's about taxation. Our taxation task force drafted it. Regulatory guidance from the Treasury Department could alleviate the harms of FATCA, which is suffered by thousands of Americans living and working abroad. Will you commit to direct the Treasury Department to study and then implement new guidance that will provide relief to ordinary Americans who are living abroad and who are demonstrably not evading taxes?
Yes, I absolutely would. And, I want to make sure that we have a system that doesn't create undue burdens on the folks who are living abroad, and, will make it convenient for people to be able to open up a bank account and do their business, conduct their financial affairs as they should be able to, and not put more stress on you and your families. And at the same time, I think as all of us recognize, and as your question recognizes, ensure that we can still guard against tax evasion. As you know, we also want to focus on, instead of everyday Americans who are out there abroad, I think there should be a particular focus area in terms of trying to find tax evasion. So I absolutely would support the Treasury taking a look at those regulations. I will say, when I was Secretary of Housing, one of the things that we worked on in the Obama administration, for instance, with the FHA or with our Housing Choice Voucher Program, was how we could cut the red tape, how we could make those programs better for the people that actually use them and the private sector that has to deal with them. And I think that's smart. When you have a program, whether that program is in this case out of the Treasury or out of one of our housing programs or health programs, you want to make sure that it's working well for the people that have to use it. And I think that goes for people who are liberal or conservative. You want to make sure that these things are smooth and they work well and they don't have unintended consequences. So I absolutely would support that.
Thank you so much. And Amanda, do we have a follow-up question for that?
Yeah, that's really great to hear, and relates to our next question. So most Americans living abroad think that the time has come for residency-based taxation, which is the principle guiding all other countries' tax systems and a fix for numerous unjust burdens on Americans living and working abroad. So there are bipartisan revenue-neutral proposals to implement residency-based taxation that include robust provisions to protect the law from abuse of tax evaders. All we need is a moment of leadership to get this done. Will you be that leader?
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda, for the question. I absolutely would support ways that we can make this fairer for people out there. And also, as I said, continue to address the issue of tax evasion. And really, a lot of the attention, I think, needs to be focused on evaluating the effect of the change in tax law for corporations in the latest tax legislation from the Trump administration. And, we need to see how is that working. Obviously, there's an interest in what companies are doing abroad, but I recognize that that's different from everyday Americans who are out there who are working or studying or pursuing their lives. And so I absolutely am willing to consider ways that we can relieve some of that burden, particularly if we're able to do it in a revenue neutral way.
Thanks so much. Lizette, would you like to take the next question on healthcare? Oh, wait 1 second, Lizette.
Sure.
There you go.
Okay. In a 2019 survey of Americans living abroad, Democrats Abroad found that 2.2% cited their reason for living abroad as affordable health care. These numbers include healthcare refugees who cannot afford to return to live in the U.S. due to high cost of health care and the threat of bankruptcy due to illness. Under your healthcare plan, will Americans currently abroad at all income levels and states of health be able to return to live in the U.S. and receive quality, affordable, accessible health care for their families at reasonable cost and without threat of bankruptcy?
Thank you, Lizette, for that question. Absolutely, they would. I'm sure that many of the people who are watching this who live abroad now, I bet for y'all it has been a real education in the differences in approach in healthcare in countries around the world, and that's something that is so important to each one of us and our families. And I think that there's a lot of things that you could teach those of us who are here about your experiences out there. What I believe is that we should have a healthcare system that is fundamentally built on Medicare, that we should strengthen Medicare for the people who are on it and then expand that to everybody who wants to be a part of it with automatic enrollment. So the way I see it is a Medicare-based system with a private option. If people wanted to have a supplemental health insurance plan or private plan that is strong and solid and perhaps provides some coverage that they don't otherwise have, I believe that that's okay, that they should have that opportunity. But my focus would be on a strong public plan that is based off of Medicare, that absolutely would be a lot more affordable than we see today. I grew up with a grandmother that had type 2 diabetes, and her condition got worse and worse as my brother and I got older. But I watched the difference that Medicare made. And to me, it makes no sense today that in the United States, you have to pay 10 times more for insulin here than you do just in Canada up the road. Or that people go to Canada or to Mexico for their medical procedures or dental procedures or for medication because it's too expensive here. I believe that we can be better than that as a country, that we owe that to Americans, and that's what I would work toward.
Thanks so much. And if, in case it's useful, we are putting together healthcare stories from Americans abroad all over the world, and we'd really be happy to send them to you and to other campaigns who are interested in that, because we believe it's an interesting story.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, that absolutely would be wonderful, because I'm especially interested in hearing the comparative, experience out there. I think y'all have a lot to offer in terms of your experiences out there.
Fantastic. We will get on that. Thanks so much. So we have one, do we have time for one more question?
On my end, you do. I don't.
Okay, great. So this is about voter protection, which is really important for us. Our votes, we value them highly. And while federal legislation provides some protection for overseas voters, the legislation does not go far enough to counter the challenges that states and recently the Trump administration have set up to limit voting from abroad. It's interesting to note that 67% of abroad ballots are returned by mail, largely due to state requirements. Yet postal delivery of ballots is really fraught with problems, and during each election, thousands of ballots do not arrive on time to be counted. How will you help protect the rights of Americans abroad to vote while helping states ensure that ballots are returned safely?
Thanks a lot for that question. Number one, I absolutely want everybody to be able to exercise the franchise. This country was built on, over the generations, getting better and better about expanding the franchise. It strikes me that in 2020 we're gonna celebrate 100 years of women's suffrage in this country, and so it's ironic that we think about the state of voting in the United States today. The last thing that I want to do is not count a ballot from people who have been so motivated, who are not living within the bounds of the country, but are American citizens that can vote. And they took all the time to cast their ballot. So what I would do is make sure, number one, that my administration would review exactly our performance on that and the performance of each and every one of these states. Because as you know, it's states and counties that control right now, that administer those ballots. We want to do two things. Number one, we want to use a carrot. I want to give states and counties more resources so that they can get stronger about administering these elections. I want to give our postal service more resources so that specifically during election times, with regard to ballots, mail-in ballots, we have a better system in place to ensure that they get there by the deadline to the person that needs it, the voter, and also that it gets back in time to be counted. But we also want ways to penalize states that are not doing a good job of this, and after a review. And I think that's something that we can work on, because we have seen too many instances where, I'm thinking of Florida in the last election, there were ballots that came in from overseas after the deadline. We want every vote to be counted, and I'm committed to that, not only in that way, but also within the country, revamping the Voting Rights Act, pushing back against this voter suppression that is happening in states like Georgia and my home state of Texas and so many other states, but making sure that this works for Democrats abroad and all people who are voting abroad, including our military, is another component of that I'm committed to.
Well, thank you so much. That is really very interesting to us, and I appreciate your really deep answer on that. Thank you also for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join our call and dig into a few of the questions that we deeply care about. Before we sign off, I just want everyone to remember that Secretary Castro's petition is on the Democrats Abroad website, and that's at www.democratsabroad.org/Castro. Again, that's www.democratsabroad.org/Castro. Secretary Castro, would you like to add a last word?
Yes, again, thank you very much to Julia, Lizette, Amanda, to all of our Democrats abroad, and my best wishes again for great success now and in the years to come. Thank you for participating. We want to create in this country a nation that is better than it's ever been before. I don't want to take our country backward. I don't want to make our country anything again. I want to make us better than ever in the years to come, to take us into the future with a nation that is smarter, that is healthier, that is fairer, and that is more prosperous for everyone. I hope that you'll go to our website, juliancastro.com. We're at a very critical moment in this campaign. As I'm sure people know, the DNC has put thresholds on the ability to get into debates, and we need to raise $800,000 within the next 10 days by the end of October 31st to be viable, to continue on in the campaign. And throughout this campaign, I've tried to be bold and fearless and lift up the voices that often aren't heard, and to fight for everyone, for a nation where everyone counts. If you appreciate that, I hope that you'll go to our website and be supportive. And also, please sign the petition so that we can get on the ballot with Democrats abroad. Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. We appreciate that so much. Thanks again, and Secretary, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. We look forward to seeing you in future candidate calls and at our primary next spring.
Yes, thank you, Secretary Castro, and thanks to all of you for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the Global Town Hall with Secretary Castro as much as I did. Now, your support goes a long way. Please visit democratsabroad.org/donate so that we can continue to bring more events like these to Americans around the world. We'd also love to have your support as a volunteer. Next year, it's going to be all hands on deck. So please sign up at democratsabroad.org/volunteer to get involved. New first-time volunteers are very welcome. With that, we're going to be ending the call. So thanks again to all of you and to Secretary Castro for joining our Global Town Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.